All right, Tessa, welcome to the Energized Leader Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I thought you would be perfect for the show because you have so much experience on building cohesive, effective teams, working with leaders. And I just thought you could give so many tips to them today on how they can make better teams. We're going to talk about trust, connections, psychological safety, and even maybe how to work with difficult people.
Ooh, good
Yeah.
topics.
Yeah. So there's a lot, there's a lot to unpack only because I know you're just full of so much,
Aw.
so let's start out by, in one word, how would you describe an energized leader?
One word. Ooh, that's a tough one. One word. I mean, an energized, that's not one word. See, I'm rambling here, but I don't know if I could use any other word but energized. I mean, if they're energized, then they have the energy to go and do that. But if I can just speak a little bit more into this, because
Yes.
sometimes an energized leader doesn't necessarily show up and have energy all the time either, right? So if I was to find one word, I would probably use fulfilled.
That's a good
I'm
word.
thinking of, I'm just thinking about myself, and I know, I sometimes don't feel the energy to go and do the work that I do all the time. I'm not as, perhaps all, full of energy, full of spark, full of all the things that people expect from me, but I'm still fulfilled in the work that I do. So I feel like I can still be an energized leader and be fulfilled, but I may not have the energy day one that I may have day two, as I may have day three, and it may be better day four. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that does. I like that. Again, just in the field that both of us work, I mean, there are days when you're going to walk into that room or get on that stage and in the back of your mind you're thinking, "Oh, I need some more energy." But I'll just tell you, well, as soon as I step on the stage, the energy goes. And so a lot of times you have to kind of like step out in faith that the energy is going to be there. And when you also do what you love to do, that energy is going to come back.
Absolutely. I agree.
So how would you, or let me reword that. Um, when you're talking about building cohesive teams, what are some suggestions on how leaders can do that?
Well, I think it starts with understanding the people in front of you. I think a lot of times leaders are trying to build these cohesive teams and they're turning right away to systems and processes and things like that, which are great. I'm not saying we don't need that. But I think if you're building a cohesive team is going to also be energized by the work that they do. And in order to have each of your team members energized, then you need to understand what gets them lit up, what gets them fired up, what makes them want to come to your organization every day and do the work that they do. I don't know about you, but I have teams that do really difficult work, right? We're not all just working in environments where we don't see our customers or, they're not going through difficult things. I have clients who deal with clients who are unhoused. I have clients who deal with, you know, clients who are disabled, and that saps a lot of energy. And when you don't understand what one of your team members are going through and you can't recognize that in them, then how are we going to give them the energy to continue moving forward and be a part of these really awesome teams that are showing up for the people we serve?
And that takes time and energy.
Yes.
It takes that time to go out and communicate, walk among the people. I mean, we've heard John Maxwell, we're both John Maxwell team members. We've heard John
Yeah.
talk about it all the time about walking among the crowd, going out there, being with them. I mean, you're not going to know unless you ask the question. I remember working at a hospital for 35 years, and I saw 7 CEOs come and go. And there was one particular
Wow.
CEO I never, ever, except one time when he was with a group of people. I don't know if it was a tour or not, but I never saw him out on the floors. And it's like, how are people going to trust you? How are people going to communicate with you if you're hid in your office the whole time?
Yeah, I think what a lot of leaders need to recognize is that what's going through our heads as team members is, do you care for me? Like, do you care about me, right? Do you know what energizes me? Do you know what makes me want to show up and bring my best to work? And I think a lot of people, a lot of leaders will say, well, I don't have time to do that. And I'll argue, I'll push back, then you are either A, watching over too many people because one leader cannot watch over, 1,000 person organization. Um, or B, you're in the wrong role because as a leader, that is your job. Get to know those, maybe that first line below you, and then help them get the next set of people and so on and so forth. But, we want to know that we are more than just a worker coming to work. I often say in my workshops, you need to get to know the human in front of you, not just the worker that comes to work.
Oh, that is so true. I remember also working at that hospital, many times I heard people talk about Mr. Schreiber, Mr. Schreiber, Mr. Schreiber, Mr. Schreiber. And he was a CEO there years before I had gotten there. And I would ask people, what was so great about Mr. Schreiber? Oh, Mr. Schreiber, I mean, he would take the time to talk with us. He even knew the name of my dog. I mean, it was like so evident that he was a people person, that he was out among the people. So, yeah, he left a
Yeah.
huge legacy.
I just finished reading Design Lovin' by Marcus Buckingham. And in that book, he starts off and he's telling a story about this gentleman. I can't remember his name, but he doesn't give away who this gentleman is, which company he works for, but he just says what you were speaking to, that everyone loves him. Everyone wants to get in front of him. And as the book progresses, eventually we get to the point where he shares it's I don't know if it's the CEO or what the term would be, but of Disney, essentially the guy who runs Disney. And his style was very much walking through the crowd and getting to know his people. Now, there's a lot of people who work at Disney. So I'm sure he's not going to perhaps remember every single person's name, but he makes a point to make sure that he takes his time to go and acknowledge his people. He thanks the people who may be cleaning the washrooms or, maybe jobs that we're like, well, we don't really need to spend time with them. He makes it a point to walk slowly through those, as John calls it, walking slowly through the crowd, and goes and like, how are you? How are you enjoying work here? Asking them about things. And I just think like if someone working for a large organization like Disney can take time to go and do that, I think, most leaders are not running a Disney organization. We can do it. It takes effort, and as you said, it takes time, but I think it's definitely needed inside of our organizations today.
It's interesting you talk about the CEO of Disney because the CEO of Disney, Walt Disney,
Yeah.
if you read about his life and when he worked at Disney, he did the same thing. He he loved being out among the people. He would get on rides, sometimes in disguise,
Mm,
sometimes not, because he wanted to hear what people were saying. He wanted to see what they were seeing. He wanted to be in their shoes because he wanted to find out what they thought, what they felt, and what was important to them. And I love the story also where he would go into human resources, and this is after Disney was getting really large, and he was having a hard time remembering people, what their names were, and so he would memorize pictures with their names, pictures with their names. I mean, he
mm.
spent time actually doing that so that he could, when he would walk down one of the streets, he could say, "Hi, John. Hi, Sally." I mean, wow, what a great connection.
Right? And I'm sure there's people listening here today that are thinking, but I'm not that personality style. Like I'm not a highly relational person. And so that would not be authentic for me. And I think it's also important for people to understand that however you get to know your people, it does have to match your style. You may not do like these two Disney people are doing. And I'm sure the one that Marcus was talking about in his book was probably lived under that leadership, right? And so he now has lived that legacy on. But I think that there's other ways to still value our people if doing what we're talking about right now is feeling really exhausting for you and not something that would energize you. I think you need to still find creative ways to make sure that your people know that you care about them.
And sometimes it's a handwritten note.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's sending an email, even though in person is better. But sometimes it is the email, or it's a handwritten note, or a post-it. Just dropping it on somebody's desk. Now, I got to tell you a funny story that reminds me of years ago. I worked in our church, and it was a weekend thing where I would do bookkeeping or whatever it was. And one day I walk in, and on my desk is a roll of toilet paper. I thought, well, this is interesting. And on the toilet paper, the pastor had written on the toilet paper, just want you to know I'm thinking about you, praying for you if you're having a poopy day.
Oh, that is hilarious. I love that.
And I still have that piece of toilet paper. And it made my day. It wasn't in person, but it was such a small little thing that he did that
Yeah.
I knew he valued me.
Yeah. So good. So good.
So I love also, I think it was about a year and a half ago, I was in one of the sessions with you, and we were all talking about psychological safety, which, really wasn't a term that I remember, when I worked at the hospital many years ago. But now I understand how important that is. And so can you talk a little bit about psychological safety and how that can be created in the workplace by a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. So I learned about psychological safety a few years ago, picked up a book called The Four Stages of Psychological Safety, and it just made so much sense to me because, in the workplace, we're coming there. There's four stages, according to Timothy R. Clark. And, first stage is inclusion safety. So essentially, it's like, do I belong here? People are coming into our organizations and they're asking themselves, like, do I belong here? Do people include me? Do people like me for who I am, like as a human, not because I'm male or female, white or, Asian, just I'm a human being that comes in this door and am I included? So that's the very first phase. And then we have learner safety, which is really, can I come here and make mistakes? Am I afraid that if I make a mistake, I'm going to lose my job? Like, what does that look like? So, as people are working inside of their organizations, they're careful if they don't know the answer to that. I recently worked with a bunch of engineers, and I mean, engineers are designing buildings that you make a mistake, someone's life is in your hands. And so, they are constantly asking, what's going to happen if I make a mistake? So they need to know there's obviously mistakes you can make earlier on. And then there's ones that we want to avoid down the road. Then we have what we call challenger safety, which is it safe to challenge here? Not only my peers, not only perhaps those I lead, but those who lead me. Am I allowed to say, I don't know if I agree with this decision? Let's have a conversation. Are those types of conversations allowed in our organization? And then finally, contributor safety, which is, do I have something that I can contribute to this conversation? And so inside of teams, I think it's important that we have all four and we need all four in order for there to be trust as well. So, we talk a lot about trust. But what we need to really be talking about is there's some things that may come before trust. Like, can I make a mistake? Do I trust you with my being coming in here, with my stories, with who I am, and that sort of thing. And so I think there's a lot of organizations now that are having this conversation, and they're opening their eyes to perhaps a culture they think that is very inclusive and finding out like maybe there's people who don't feel like they belong here and making the necessary changes that they need to make.
My very first job, and well, this is not the teen years, but after I got out of college, I was scared of my boss
Mhm.
because she was harsh, and she, if you felt like you needed to challenge her because, I think there's a better way to do this. It got to the point where I never said anything, even though I thought they're not really doing what I think they should be doing, or there's a better way to do that. I just got to a point where I never said anything. And so I don't know if it's more with maybe younger people, maybe because I was inexperienced. I mean, now, I have a lot of confidence now. I would say, no, I don't think that's going to work. So maybe that would get me in trouble. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's really important that a leader will allow people to feel that they can challenge, not in a mean way, but just to
Yeah.
say, hey, I think we have an idea that would work out better.
Absolutely, because really it's not my idea that should win, it's the best idea that should win. So as a leader, if you're always thinking my idea wins because I'm the leader, your organization is suffering because there's no way you always have the best idea, right? From that story, it's interesting because you see all four of these stages of psychological safety at play. It's not like you only have one or, you can only have two. Like you have to have them all because you mentioned you couldn't challenge. Well, as soon as someone doesn't allow us to challenge, then we no longer contribute because we think every time I contribute, my ideas aren't taken seriously or they don't want them. So I'm just going to not contribute, which then leads to, do I even belong here? The inclusion safety piece starts to get questioned. And then I think if you've shut down in all three of those areas, then you're not going to be learning. You're going to be coming, you're going to be doing the bare minimum, and you're just going to check out. Right. And so when we think of the energized leader and the things that you speak to here as an organization, if we're doing that to our people and we're wondering why our people are disengaged, well, we may want to look at those four things and go, do we allow for this to happen here? Or are we, unintentionally or unaware of how we're squashing the people who are coming here and robbing them of the joy of being a part of this team?
Yeah, so true. When you think about working with people, sometimes we work with difficult people, or
Hmm.
we work with people that aren't like us, or our personality, or our communication style. So, can you kind of give some tips on, the best ways to work with people? Maybe you don't like them. I mean, it happens, or maybe they're difficult people. And so, I would love your take on that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because last year a team brought me in. They wanted me to come in and speak to them about how to lead difficult managers, how to lead difficult people. And so I came into the session and the first thing I asked them is, how many of you know a difficult person? And everyone raised their hand. And I said, how many of you are that person? And they all laughed. And I said, you thought that I was coming here today for 3 hours to teach you strategies on how to deal with difficult people, but you are someone's difficult person. And so I spent the next 3 hours talking to them about how we are also a difficult person, right? Like I may think Joey down the street is difficult, but then Desi may think Tessa's difficult, right? So at the end of the day, it's full circle. And my difficult person might be the person you love spending the most time with. And so I think the key to dealing with difficult people is to lead with understanding right from the start. Understand that difficult simply just means different. So it's in our language, right? Difficult may mean you do something some way like very different than I would ever imagine doing it. It's not in my DNA to do it that way, but does it mean that your way is the wrong way? And I think we need to turn the mirror towards us and go, how am I playing a role in this difficult relationship? What was really cool about that session is the leader that brought me in. I didn't know this going into the session. He had a manager in that room that was very difficult. And he had had several years of trying to lead this leader, and it wasn't going well. And so essentially, he was bringing me in to help him understand how to lead that person. And he called me a week after and he said, you know what, Tessa, I don't know exactly what it was that you said, but he said something that definitely stood out to me is when you asked us to, consider what it's like on the other side of ourselves.
Hmm.
And I really thought about the relationship that I had. I didn't tell you this, but I've had several years of not being able to work with this leader, And I went home and I thought about that. Like, what is it like on the other side of me? That's a Ryan Leake question. I did not make that one up. And he said, I started to think about perhaps what it would be like for them to work with me. And he's like, we had 5 hours together in a room last week. And he says, it was a great day. We have not been able to do that for years. But it was like when we think of people as difficult, then we assign certain character flaws to them. We decide who they are. We don't leave room for understanding. We don't leave room for perhaps our own behaviors and how it's making that relationship difficult. And so, I think we need to also just consider the other side. And there's going to be people who are difficult. I mean, we know there's narcissists in this world. There's people who are difficult, but I really don't think the majority of people that we come into contact with are difficult. I think they're just different.
Yeah, different is a good word for that. When I do one of my sessions, I have people in groups write down as many characteristics of a negative person in the workplace. And of course, they really get into that one. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
say, no names, no names. And they're just writing away, writing away, writing away. And then when I have them stop, the contest is to see who came up with the most. And, so what's interesting is I'll have that person read it or read the list. And sometimes it's, usually average about 30 different characteristics that they come up with. And then I tell them the story that when I first started doing this, I used to collect all those papers because I wanted to compile those for that first book that I wrote, which was called Do You Work with the Living Dead? How to Survive Among Negative and Lifeless People. And I compiled, and I still get new ones every single time. I have now
Oh, wow.
compiled at least 200 characteristics of a negative person in the workplace. And so then at some point, I asked them, how many of you in this room has ever displayed at least one or two of those? All the hands go up. And so many times we are thinking about everybody else being difficult or different when we haven't looked at ourselves.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people have said so many times to me is, I went into this with the attitude about everybody else when
Mm.
actually I'm the problem.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm looking up at I have a board in front of me and I have two things written down because I've started these understanding notes where every week I release a note. And I just took two pieces of that because I'm also practicing this. And one of them says every person is carrying something and has a deep desire to be understood. And the second one, which I love and I had to even learn today, was what might I not understand yet?
Mm.
And so it's, I was a difficult person today in a conversation with my mother. Like I know I was that. And within 20 minutes, I was like, what might I not understand yet about this situation that we're talking about? And I was able to go back and be like, I am so sorry. Right. And so I think that's what we need. You need more people to look in the mirror and say, I think you were making an assumption here, or I think you were being a little bit difficult here, and not just look at the other person. And that
Mm-hmm.
takes humility. That
Yes.
takes humility. And I think a humble leader is a very strong leader, one that can say, I screwed up.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think it's all about having awareness. Because many times we just go, 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 and we don't
Hmm.
know maybe how we're coming across to other people. One time I got called into the boss's office and he asked me a question. He said, are you upset? And I said, nope. He said, are you angry? I said, nope. He said, no, really. Are you mad at somebody? I said, no. What? And I laughed. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, all the staff thinks you're upset. And I said, I'm not upset. So what it finally came down to is when I'm in think mode and I was walking down the hallways, I mean, it was kind of like, and if you're listening, I have my brows up and I'm just kind of like scowling a little bit, but that's how I am when I'm thinking. And so
Yeah.
funny now because now I know that I have to
Yes.
be very careful, especially if I'm walking into a conference and I'm speaking. I mean, I am so focused on what I'm going to say, making sure this is ready, this is ready, this is ready. And when I walk in, I can't look that way. I have
Right.
to be very, very careful. So it's all about having that awareness, and because it shows up if
Yeah.
if you don't know how you're coming across.
Yeah, no, that is a really good point because I think we can be, people who are really focused. You're walking through and all of a sudden your team member thinks you're mad. But I think there's also responsibility on the team member and those of us who may be judging your face and going, "Oh, Desi is upset with me right now." And then we go and create a story that isn't necessarily true, right? In those moments, we can say, just like this leader asked you, Desi, are you okay? Like, did I do anything? And you'll be like, no, why? Okay, you just have a look on your face. And then you'd be like, oh, no, sorry, I'm just in think mode right now. But we don't do that. We often create our own story based on what that person is saying or doing. And we believe that story. And then we believe that story about that person.
Hmm. Now, one of the last things I want you to do is share the beach ball analogy because I think that's so
Yeah.
good on perspective. And many
Hmm.
times we need to alter our perspective. So, can you share the beach ball analogy? And for those
Yeah,
of you that are
absolutely.
listening, you might have to watch the YouTube version so that you can really get a good visual of this. But go ahead and explain that.
All right, I'll do my best for those who are listening. I have a little beach ball here, and there's several different colors on the ball. And when I teach communication and I get to the part where I want to talk about perspective, I usually bring one of these out and everyone in the room has it. And so if I was holding it up and Desi, you're on the other side, and I asked you, what color do you see on my beach ball? You would say,
Green, white, and red.
I'd say, no, it's yellow, blue, and orange. Can you look again? What do you see?
No, it's green, white, and red.
No, there must be something wrong with you. There's something wrong with Desi, right? And that's what we do. Like, oh, there's something wrong. We start to say things. But if we just took a moment and turn the beach balls around, I would see what Desi was seeing. And then Desi would see what I was seeing. Now, what I love about this analogy of turning the beach ball to see someone else's perspective is it shows that you're not right and I'm not wrong and I'm wrong, or I'm not right and you're wrong. We were both right based on what we saw. And most of the time, when we're having conversations with people and there's disagreements, we are both right to some level, right? We have our model of the world. We have, our experiences and our circumstances. We have the limited information often that we're going with, and we are defending or sharing our point of view based on just those three little colors that we see. And so it's really important for us to turn that beach ball. And it doesn't mean I'm all of a sudden going to say, like, oh, yeah, I was wrong and you're right. Or if it's a decision, oh, yeah, what I wanted to fight for is not the right one. Sometimes I'm still going to stand behind my decision and say, thank you for your perspective, but it is still blue, orange, and white or yellow, right? So I think what's important is turning the beach ball doesn't necessarily mean you have to take someone else's side or someone else's perspective or someone else's idea. The idea behind it is you want to be heard and you want to be valued as a human and you want to be understood. And it doesn't always lead to agreement. But if it leads to understanding, then I think it really helps those relationships and conversations.
Oh, that is so great. I love the beach ball analogy. So we're going to end with a fun question. Are you ready for the fun question?
I'm ready.
All right. So in the last 6 months, have you seen an amazing movie, read an awesome book, or bought a really cool gadget?
So I actually have a really cool gadget I want to share. I think I've shared it with you. It's right here beside me. It's my
Oh,
catch
that's cool. I
box.
haven't seen that. Uh-uh.
Oh, I think you're going to want to get one after this. So this is a wireless mic. If you're listening, it's a square box. It's spongy. And inside the square box is a microphone. which I'm pulling out right now.
Sweet.
And when I speak or lead workshops, we all know you ask questions to the crowd and we're like, what did you say? What did that person in the back of the room say? We bring this and we throw it into the audience and they can speak and then they can be heard and then they can throw it to someone else. Now, you need to let people know not to get knocked out. I usually say I don't have insurance. I'm not responsible if anyone, gets hurt. So this is on you. Once it leaves my hands, whatever happens there, but it is so much fun. And, I've even had people who didn't want to speak. This got on their table and they're like, oh, okay, I'll take a turn. And they speak into the mic. So this is my new favorite gadget.
I love it. I'm going to be getting one of those.
You got to get one. And you can brand it if you really want it. You can mine isn't branded, but you can brand it.
Oh, I love that. Love that. All right. Well, you've been an amazing guest on the Energized Leader podcast. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.